Hey, what is going on? Today we're going to cover the linear search written in C++ today. If you watched my previous video, I did cover linear search with pseudocode and just went over the algorithm. And if you saw it, you will know that linear search is a very inefficient algorithm for very large data sets. Works fine with very small data sets, between probably 1 and 1 million numbers, say, per se. Um, Once you get past that, it starts to really slow because if you saw, it does run in O of n in the worst case, and we're gonna test that with this code right now. So let's jump right into it. I've already written all the boring parts. You don't need to watch me type all this code again. As you know, IOStream takes input output std instead of having to do this all the time. I can prevent that by using the namespace std, so now I can just write cout and it works just as fine. So we're going to set up main here. We're not going to write any functions yet. So we're going to need to bring in some libraries though, because we will need those. So let's bring those in right now. So we will need fstream, which reads a file. We're going to need the string, and then I'm going to use vectors to hold my numbers. I'm not going to create a dynamic array or any of that things right now just to save some time. As vectors are already that on the front, and you can just push back and pop out if you need to. With that being said, let's jump back down to main here and write this out really quickly. So if we do fstream for our file, and then we have a file name, which I'm going to grab really quickly. I already have the file made up, which holds 10,000 numbers. And we just set that path to that file name string. And we need a line. And I'm also going to need my vector of integers because my file holds numbers, or integers to be exact. I'm just going to name that nums. Don't set it to anything. I'm going to need an index, an int index, which was what we are going to return from the function of linear search. So before we can do anything, we're going to need to read from a file here, which we're going to pass in that nums vector and then the file name. And then we're going to set index equal to linear search, which this is not written yet. Just also going to take the nums vector after we read it in, and then I already know the number in the file, which we're going to find which we're going to find for this first one. That should definitely be in there. Just depends on where it's at. We'll find that with linear search. Let's jump back up to the top. Let's write our functions out or read the file. So it's void. We're not returning anything because we're going to pass in nums by reference. Read from file. And then we're going to need our vector of int. And this is where we pass by reference, which means that this remains all the same through the function, and then when you pass it back as well, nothing changes. Where if you pass by value, this is empty, you set it, and then when you return it, it also remains empty. So it's only constrained to that function. It's not, you can't access it outside of that, which we do that by passing by reference. So we need a file name here for the file name. And you take this and move this up to there. We'll need that in main, as we need that inside our read from file function. We also don't need our line as well. Now we go, that's called caps, file.open, said file name. Now if file is open, do this, else we say cout file failed to open. And we just return out of this, nothing crazy there, no try catch. Oh, if I can spell failed right. There we go. And now we're inside the file is open. If it passed, we say while get line. We pass in that file of if stream. And then we give it that string line. That way it reads each line of the file and stores it in the line variable, which then now we can use our nums. And here's the pushback, because we were adding it to the vector. Now it's reading in a string. It's not a null terminated string or new line terminated string, so we're going to have to convert it to a C string and then convert it to an integer. That way it reads into our vector of ints. So we do that by going using one of the ATO functions, which then converts a string to an integer. So then we're going to pass in the line, but then we have to dot into it and grab our C string, which converts our C++ string to a C string, which allows us to use ATOI to convert it to an integer. And that should be all to that. Now num should hold all the numbers, all the 10,000 numbers from the file inside of nums. And on success, we say file.close, and we're done. It's actually num, so let me just change all this so it makes sense. All right, great. So now we got that done. We have our linear search we have to write out, so let's do that. That's going to return an int linear search. And then we know that if we can't find anything, we're going to return a -1. So we're going to do that right out the gate. So that way, that's taken care of. We're going to, now we need our vector again of int. We don't need to pass it by reference. We can just pass it by values, because we're not doing anything with the vector itself other than just looping through it. So then we need a target number. You remember that linear search uses a target to find in the nums in this vector here. Then we return if we found it, and we return -1 if we don't. So it is just a simple for loop. And I equals 0, I is less than nums.size. We say I++, and we go an if statement, if nums.i is equal to the target, then we can return the index. So we return I. That will tell you wherever this target, wherever that resides within nums. And then we can do it. You can do whatever you want to do with it. That's all we're going to do with it now. We're just going to return I. That takes care of that function. So now we have our index. And I'm going to create a helper function here. That way, if you take this code and make it your own, this will prevent you to have to write out, have to print it out every single time you add more numbers. If you run multiple of these files and try this out, because it does get slower the more numbers you add. 10,000 numbers is nothing compared for computers nowadays, so it goes fairly quick. We're going to use a helper function here, print, which will take the index, and then we will take the number we are looking for, so 3630. I'm actually going to show you an example of why I wrote this print, because we're going to search for a number that doesn't exist just a second after we write this print helper function. So then this takes also returns nothing, so a void. We say print, we say int index, and then we take an int the number you're searching for. We're going to print out the num, and then we're going to use a ternary here. If the index is greater than -1, we are going to say cout found at index, and then we say the index. Else, we're going to say cout was not found. And we're not going to add end line on any of those because we can just do that down here, as whatever the statement is just going to get the end line anyway, so no point in writing it twice. That's our little print helper function. Let's just run it. "3630 found at index 4437. So 4,437, that's where it resides in the vector. You have to put spaces here, that way we can read it. So to show you an example of how the print will work, we can go index is now going to be equal to a linear search for nums again, because we're not doing anything with it. Then we're going to say something that's outside of the range of the numbers in the file, which 11,000. There's only 10,000 numbers. And we're going to say print index 11,000. "3,630 was found at index 4,437, and 11,000 was not found." Space there. So that is all. That is to the linear search. That's all it does. Of course, you can return, the num. You can return both of these if you want it. But for this case, to keep it simple, we're just returning the index of I. Else we return -1, which is why this kicks off to not found. So that is all that's to linear search. Fairly simple. Included some file IO in here as well. It's also pretty straightforward. You just open the file. If it's open, then we get the line, each line one by one. Transform the data, close the file, else something broke. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you understood. Now you know how to write linear search in C++. Keep an eye out for other languages. And I'm also going to write linear search in. If you don't know already, if you didn't watch the linear search, I plan on taking each algorithm, explaining it, making it its own video, and then taking that and outputting multiple different languages as well. So keep an eye out for that. As always, thank you for tuning in. See ya.